Welcome to Zumustahan sa Slunay. This is our monthly event that we host for our alumni and friends. It happens every third weekend of the month, and we hope you could join us on this monthly activities. We choose our monthly topics based on the result of the survey that we did with our members, and this month's topic is actually based on your request. To know more about our future events, visit our website at www.slunai.org or visit our Slunai group on Facebook. And for those of us who are tuned in, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us. So today, presenting our special guest, our first speaker is an assistant professor of nursing at Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey. She has 17 years of experience teaching in undergraduate and graduate nursing programs and has received numerous awards for her dedication to teaching, innovation in the classroom, and acknowledged for her commitment to student advising and mentorship. She is a board certified women's health nurse practitioner and lactation consultant who was instrumental in developing the inpatient hospitalist nurse practitioner role in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, now Penn Medicine, back in 2003. She continues to practice clinically in this role of managing and championing the care of postpartum patients. Her clinical expertise is in postpartum care and well-being, contraception, lactation, and sexual health. In 2018, she was inducted as a fellow of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners for her outstanding contribution in advancing nurse practitioner, clinical practice, and education. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jamil Nagtalan Ramos.
Thank you,
Jamil, your turn.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about burnout and resilience and caring for yourself and your kapwa today. And I am hoping that I have the chat on. So I'm going to ask you questions, and I would love to hear about you and your experience as well, so that it's more interactive than just me talking the whole time. All right. So thank you again for that wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Jamil. I am a clinician that sees patients at Penn Medicine in Philly and an assistant professor and a researcher. So I was mentioning earlier before that my research during my doctoral program was actually on Filipino American nurses and their educational attainment or pursuit of educational attainment and what facilitates that pursuit and what are the barriers. One of the things that I found in interviewing 35 Filipino American nurses across 14 states in the United States, and as I mentioned earlier, prior to our official start of the meeting, I interviewed across generations. So I haven't found research that have actually interviewed across 4 different generations. The first generation nurses, my mom, who moved here when she was in her 30s, recruited as a nurse in the PEDS ICU in New Jersey. And 1.5 generation like me, who grew up in the Philippines, moved here when I was 14, 15. So my socialization was in the Philippines, but I went to school here. Second generation would be my children. And third generation would be those who have had their grandparents here. So it was kind of interesting to look across generations about interviewing Filipino American nurses across generations and their experiences. And forget who mentioned it earlier. I think maybe Minette had mentioned earlier about the Filipino nurse who's very committed to their job, and that's actually all about what I learned. And it wasn't just an experience of, N of one of what I see in my mom. I'm actually a third generation nurse, and my grandma is also a nurse, and how they're so dedicated to nursing, right? So it's almost this dedication that they have, that they want to care for their kapwa, right? And so this may lead, this dedication, this really admirable trait actually can lead to burnout. And what is burnout? It's It's a syndrome characterized by high emotional exhaustion, high depersonalization, and let me move my chat, and a low sense of personal accomplishment from work. So in the chat, if you can type up, have you ever in the last week ever say out loud, or maybe in your head, think like, oh, I'm so tired, like, oh, like I have to like do another admission. Are you kidding? Or or maybe saying something that um, kind of like is cynical, right? I said something the other day that I caught myself, and I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, like I can't believe I have to like gown up again for another COVID patient." And it shouldn't be like that, but it was really how I was feeling because I was like gowning up again. Um, so I was feeling kind of, I had to check myself and say, you know what, this is a patient and I'm taking care of them. And I should change my attitude going into the room. I can't go into that room saying, ugh, I just spent 5 minutes gowning up, um, to see the patient. So I want you to, in the chat, if you can share maybe something that you experienced in the last week. Maybe you were thinking about, how tired you were. Maybe you came home and maybe you didn't want to talk to your family right away. Sometimes for me, my drive home is my sanctuary. Take that 30 minutes to 40 minutes of like not talking to anybody because you've been talking all day, and just like really focusing on what I need to do when I get home, because it doesn't stop, right? We have families, or we have friends, and so when you go home, it doesn't stop right there. Okay, so this is a framework for burnout from the National Academy of Science and Engineering and Medicine. So in 2019, they actually came out with a document addressing burnout. So this was pre-pandemic. I thought it was actually interesting that this came out before the pandemic, and how it was so applicable to our lives post or during the pandemic. And you can see here in this that it's actually all these different things, right, that lead to someone having burnout, a clinician having burnout. So this external environment, healthcare organization, and frontline care delivery. So in March of 2020, I remember the day that they mandated for us to wear masks, for all of us, and it was actually we the staff really felt heavy. The emotions felt really heavy. I don't know if you had the same experience where you were, but coming into the hospital, it just felt that we didn't have a lot of agency and a lot of um, uh, our own way of being able to make decisions for ourselves. It was, our healthcare organization saying, this is what's happening. You have to go to this other entrance. You have to wear the same mask all day, even though we said, you know what, I would have been fired for this if I did this before the pandemic, if I wore the same mask. So all those things that felt like we weren't getting the protection that we needed. So there was a lot of pressure to take care of patients. We were learning. We didn't know exactly how this virus was and how it was playing out. So definitely all of those things were affecting us. And also, again, emotionally, mentally, and physically, we were working definitely in a heightened state of awareness. And so when all of that happens, right, you feel neglected, you feel that you don't have good locus of control, right, you don't feel safe. You think about that Maslow's hierarchy of well-being, that triangle, right? The number one is safety. If you don't feel safe, right, in the environment that you're working in, it's going to be really tough to be able to take care of others. And so that's why when burnout happens, let's see. When burnout happens, it also not only affects you, but it also affects your patients. So burnout comes from loss of connection to our patients and ourselves and those we love. And so, especially with the pandemic on top of just a really a healthcare system that's changing dramatically. You add, a pandemic on top of that. I know I felt definitely a loss of connection to my patients. It definitely decreased. Even just wearing a mask and the patient not seeing my face, right? Not being able to, hold my patient's hand without wearing gloves, right? I'm in women's health, so I'm right up in there, right? If someone needs help with breastfeeding, someone needs help like getting up to the bathroom, definitely, there's definitely like lack of connection or like less connection there. And this coming home, I know that many of us were afraid of bringing it home to our families, right? So I know that when I came home, I like basically stripped down in my garage, and don't touch me until I disinfect myself. um, and again, too often, especially in the last year and a half, we were really, I know for us, we're focused on task, and we were very much focused on making sure um, that we are doing the right thing for our patient, right? We were doing the right thing for our patients. Um, this chronic imbalance of high job demands and inadequate job resource really has led to burnout in the last year and a half. We had a high turnover in my unit, in my department, of nurses leaving the unit because of the high demand on their mental health, their physical health. We had a lot of pregnant nurses that they really were scared about getting COVID during the time that they were taking care of patients. And it not only put a lot of stress on those women, but it also put a lot of stress on other staff members who were taking on the COVID patients because, they felt bad that that their colleagues were pregnant, and they're like, I'll volunteer. I'll take one for the team, and I'll see, I'll take care of the COVID patients because I'm not pregnant. But it also turned out that they were feeling stressed at 6 months in, and they were the ones always being sent to to take care of patients with COVID. They were really so definitely having a high demanding job. And we know that many Filipino American nurses work in an ICU, right? That's how when the shortage happened in the 70s and 80s, right? Nurses were being recruited to the ICUs, working in the units that nurses who were already here did not want to work in, especially in the 80s when there was the AIDS epidemic. And nurses were being recruited from all over, specifically the Philippines. And so my mom, who was recruited in 1986, still works in the same intensive care unit that she was recruited for, and she's still there, and she loves it. And we were talking before the recording started, and how in my research, I found that Filipino nurses, and it wasn't just, I know my mom is very, very excited about her skills, but actually everyone is so, so proud of how skilled Filipino nurses are, right? So skilled. And I know when someone finds out that I'm a Filipino American nurse, first thing they'll say, oh my gosh, I worked with a Filipino American nurse. They are so skilled and so smart. Or it would be somebody that will say, oh, a Filipino nurse took care of my family, and they were like family to us. They took care of my family member so well, and they were so skilled. And so we're very proud of our skills. And so going into especially this past year and a half when there's a pandemic, and many Filipino nurses working in intensive care units, it's no surprise, right? It's no surprise that a good share, I think it was 25% of the nurses who died from COVID are Filipino nurses because of just really exposure, right? And also this idea of we never leave anyone behind. We take care of our patients like they are our family. Okay. And so there's been several coverages from New York Times to CNN to NBC. It was all over about how disproportionately Filipino nurses have been affected by COVID. And also, actually, there's new research that's showing that Filipino Americans in general, amongst Asians, are one of the highest groups of individuals that have been that are affected by COVID. They're thinking maybe it's because of pre-existing conditions. So again, proximity to healthcare workers. Many of us, are definitely related to a healthcare worker or are healthcare workers ourselves. So it's definitely interesting how it's affected us. And Minette had said, Filipino nurses, if there's a fire, we go in. We don't ask questions. We go, all right, where is my patients in there? I have to take care of them. I'm not going to question anything. I'm going to go in and take care of my patients. So again, as I mentioned before, burnout is associated with poor patient safety and quality of care. So they have done research that had shown that if someone is burnt out, right? So if you are burnt out, your well is dry, it's harder to give because your well is dry. I'm sure you've heard this, right? If the plane is crashing, you put your oxygen on first before you do it on anybody else. Because if you don't put your oxygen on first, you're not going to be able to help anybody. So if you're burnt out, it's going to affect patient care. So they've seen in research that people who are burnt out have done damage or have neglected their responsibilities to their patients. They have missed giving meds. They have missed talking to the team and collaborating with the team about their patients. They've missed even little things, little but not little things, right? That is the essence of nursing, sitting down with our patients and talking to our patients. Because if you're so burnt out, you don't want to talk to anyone, you're so tired, you don't take that extra time to sit down, sit at the bedside and talk to our patients. So it's actually really affected, burnout affects how we care for our patients. So when we're thinking about our kapwa, right, and which I'll talk about soon, it affects how we care for others. And again, it's also associated with ourselves as clinicians, as nurses, nurse practitioners, healthcare workers. It's bad for patients and us. It leads to job dissatisfaction. It leads to mental health. Feeling really burnt out mentally and physically. And so it's really hard to even harder to take care of ourselves and our patients and our loved ones. Okay, so what does kapwa mean? And I know you know this already, but kapwa indicates a shared identity and combines or relates the self with the other. So when we talk about our kapwa, right, in Filipino culture, right, you and I are very much intertwined and related, whether or not it's by blood or not. We are harmoniously together and related. That's why we care so much about each other. And so in my research, I was able to, like listening and learn so much from all these nurses who said to me, listen, I go in and take care of my patients like they're my family. I'm going to give them all the love and care because they're my family. The moment they're my patient, they're my family. So I'm going to do everything that I can. And sometimes, again, that's even if it's not taking care of ourselves and putting our patients in priority, sometimes that's what happens. When I was younger, my grandma, who's a nurse, right? She had many kidney issues. She was in the hospital a lot. And I remember asking her, and I said, Mama, why do you have all these kidney issues? Why do you have to go to the hospital all the time? And she said, you know what, as a nurse, I always forgot to go to the bathroom to pee or never went to prioritize that. because I had so many patients. And, you know, as an 8-year-old, I'm like, what do you mean? Like, if you have to go, you got to go, grandma. But I didn't really realize that until I became a nurse myself. And, you know, after 12 hours and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't gone to the bathroom all day. And as a health provider, you know, I worry about everyone's bladder and everyone's, everyone's pelvic health. Um, and I think about that. It's so simple, right? It's so simple. It's just so simple. It's like something that it's a need. You need to go and relieve yourself in the bathroom. But because my grandmother is like, well, I have to take care of my patients. My kapwa needs me. And so she put them in priority. So again, it's we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves, because taking care of ourselves is also taking care of others, if you want to think of it that way. So again, Filipinos believe they are one with humanity and are connected with creation. So they experience their individual self as part of the world. So just think about your everyday when you're talking about yourself. You can, I know for me, I can never talk about just myself without identifying myself with others, right? So I always identify myself as like, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. So because we are so intertwined with our family. So I just want you to be like mindful in the next week, think about like, oh wait, like I am this person. This is my culture. You know, I am very much intertwined with others. So my experience is always related to like the experience of others, right? And I see my kids doing the same thing. When they're talking about their experience, they always talk about their experience. It's very experiential with others. And that makes us, you know, very much an empathetic individual. But also, again, we have to have that in mind when we're thinking about caring for others, that we also make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Let's see, here we go. Again, this is from CNN, how lots of news about Filipino American nurses being disproportionately affected by COVID. And I'm sure you probably know a Filipino nurse who had COVID, was affected by COVID, or even had passed away from COVID. All right, so I don't want to go into our other speakers talk, but I just want to share some things that I know I use for myself and that I share with others. You know, I have a lot of mentees, up and coming Filipino American nurses that really struggled not only with the pandemic, but also the Asian American hate that's been happening in our communities. And so we've been really trying to create space and hold space for everyone to be able to share our stories with each other, and to be able to be a listening ear, and really helping each other out. So coping strategies include planful problem solving. This means just because there are patients doesn't mean that we're the only ones that are responsible for the patient. I always say nursing is 24/7. You can't be there 24/7. So that means it's okay to, you know, delegate. It's okay to ask another nurse for help. It doesn't, it doesn't reflect badly on you that you're asking for help. But in fact, it's actually good thinking about your patient at the end. What is helping? What is best for our patient? And that's what I stop myself sometimes from, I say to myself, oh my gosh, I just got to get all this done. I have to do it all by myself. And at the end of the day, I say to myself, what is best for the patient? And that's how I teach new nurses and residents. And I tell them, even when we're doing a plan of care for a patient, are we doing this out of convenience for us, or are we doing this for the patient? So other things like getting regular sleep, I know in my research, I've also seen that a lot of Filipino nurses work in the evening or at night, because that's where we can share our own language, bring our own food, Especially in my mom's generation. She said to me, I didn't have to talk to a lot of family members. And so, at night shift, they were left alone. They know they had good skills. They know they could take care of patients. They don't want to deal with all this other chatter. And so my mom's like, she's been working night shift, I don't know, for 25 years. And so getting regular sleep, it's really affected her sleep big time. And we know we have good data about shift work and how that affects our circadian rhythms and how it affects our well-being. Exercise, I try to do a 2-mile walk around the lake with my kids every day, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And so my goal always is anytime I can move my body for 20 to 30 minutes, that's great. It's a check. I do 80-20, 80% good food, healthy food, nutritious food, and 20% I'm like, whatever. And it's just, a balance also for my kids. And they need to see that I'm trying hard to feed my body and move my body every single day, that it's actually a commitment that I'm doing every single day. Spending time with family and friends, engaging in recreation or hobbies. I don't have to tell you guys that, because it seems like you guys have a really good group here that, that for you. So, when you think about Tibay, right? Matibay, like you're like persevering and you want to remain positive and have that mindset and skill set that enables you to be able to persevere, right? And that grit, not just for today, but actually persevering for the future. So it's not a one and done, it's continuous, it's a dynamic state. And as I mentioned before, it's a commitment every day. And it's a commitment to be positive every day. And, I shared with you before, having that cynicism or like, ugh, like I'm so tired. It's a switching your mindset to be a growth mindset. And it's actually, when I teach a 3-hour lecture for my students, I take 5 minutes out of that lecture every single lecture. And I talk about growth mindset, because I think it starts from there. It doesn't, all this help with like being able to be resilient as a nurse. Really, we should be teaching it right from the get-go. They need to learn about it and hear about it. And it's okay that, to acknowledge all those struggles. Oops, that's me trying to make sure that I don't go overboard. And talking to them, even little things, again, that I say to them, okay, today, what is your strength word? What is the word that you're going to focus on today, and that you're going to be resilient, and that you're going to persevere? So we've seen in research that personal relationships and support systems like this really helps out, but also you have to be careful, but it could also be a source of stress. Sometimes when you're pulled in many different directions, that can be stressful for you. So encourage self-care beyond the bubble bath. So I tell my students this all the time. Listen, bubble baths are great after, after a long shift, but, it's not changing your mentality and building your resilience. So you need to also normalize, encourage, and support friends, family, and colleagues to seek mental health services. I know that when I was a freshman in college, and my father died when I was away in college, I asked my mom if I can go see a therapist, and she said, no, we don't do that because it's going to be on your chart. And I said, you're a nurse, mom. You know how important this is. But she refused. And I think a lot of that is definitely built into the culture and also our family. So, 20 something years later, I'm seeing grief counselor and still working through a lot of the things that I should have worked through when I was 19. So normalizing that and talking about it. I talk to my kids about it. I'll say, I have to have an hour to myself. I'm seeing my counselor. And so it becomes normal for them as well. So we know that Filipino Americans seek mental health services at lower rates than other Asian American groups. So again, normalizing all of this is very important. Supporting yourself is supporting your kapwa. It's, again, we're all interrelated. So supporting ourselves and really making that choice every single day to build resiliency, moving your body, feeding your body well, getting good sleep really helps. So this is my grandma and my mom. Between us, we have over 100 years of nursing service. That's my grandma. She passed away last year. But yeah, so three generations of nursing. Thank you, everyone.
Information regarding burnout, resilience, and then also you tapped into some of the strategies that we can do to really help us eliminate or decrease burnout among Filipino nurses. So let's go ahead then. I will go ahead and present our second speaker. Our second speaker is Miss Karen Retardo. Karen has a presence that challenges and lifts individuals intuitively. She is from St. Louis University, class of '94, and was the president of the College of Nursing Student Council from 1993 to 1994. She started her career as an assistant director of nursing at Plum Healthcare Group. She was a dialysis nurse, then eventually moved to utilization management, case management, where she found her niche and has enjoyed the variety of cases she handles since then. Following her passion, she completed a Master's of Arts in Spiritual Psychology. She is a global Gallup certified strength coach and founded the company Health Centered Holistic Coaching and coaching company that helps overwork nurses and avoid burnout so they can design and live a life they truly love. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very own Miss Karen Retardo.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Okay. Question. How many of you want to feel energized and reinvigorated? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you not only want to feel energized and reinvigorated, but would want to feel that even after working an 8-hour, a 10-hour, or a 12-hour shift? I do. Well, great. For the next 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to share with you how to go from blah to 3 proven ways to avoid burnout. And first, I want to thank everyone who's here. Thank you for your time. I know it's a Saturday. Morning sa iba, afternoon, maybe evening to others. Thank you for taking your time to be here. Some are even working and just listening right now. I promise I'm going to make this worth your while. And I want to thank Eslunay for inviting me and for giving this opportunity to be here. So let's give them a hand. And thanks, Dr. Jamil. That was such a great presentation. Learned a lot, a lot of gems that I'm going to take away. And before I share with you, how to go from blah to 3 proven ways how to avoid burnout, would it be okay to share a little bit of myself?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Well, I love nursing. I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. And after graduating from my bachelor's of nursing, I moved to California in the mid-90s, 1994, to live the American dream. And I remember when I started my first job, I was so excited, excited to help people, excited to save lives, earning money. I was really, really happy. And then I noticed, after a couple of years or maybe 3 years, I started noticing I'm already starting to feel young stress, overwhelmed, burnt out. And in my head, I'm having that conversation, really, Karen, not even 5 years. Pagod ka na in nursing, you don't wanna be a nurse anymore. And I just felt like a zombie back then. Alarm would go off, hit the snooze button, and then alarm na naman, hit the snooze button. So multiple times, not just twice, but hitting the snooze button multiple times, because I just not dread, but just didn't like going to work, dragging myself to go to work. I'm already thinking oh my goodness, demanding patients, demanding family, coworkers that are difficult to work with. And then admissions and discharges. It's revolving door. Oh my goodness, after one discharge, there's an admission. So it was really taking a toll on me. Then go home, cook, watch TV, And then like, ganun ulit, like just repeating the cycle. It felt like groundhound dog. And I started questioning, like, oh, is this it? Is this what life's really about? Then in 1996, like one of my sisters, Kay, visited me from the Philippines, and there was something different about her. Like, she was happy, bubbly, excited, more loving, more caring, and we weren't butting heads as much. And like we used to butt heads a lot. So like in my head, I'm like, there's something different about her. I'm like, I want to have what she got. So she shared, like she mentioned that she took a personal growth seminar. She shared what she learned, and then I liked what I heard. So I told her, okay, sign me up, huh? Like, because I didn't want na siya lang yung my good juju around her. I wanted to have what she had. So I did take the seminar, and being around, like, personal growth and personal development arena, like really gave me the opportunity to be introduced to great mentors, great coaches, which led me in 2010 to take my master's in spiritual psychology at University of Santa Monica. And I completed it in 2012. So going back, like, sharing my nurse story, I remember after being a nurse for 3 years, there was this day, like I took a women's leadership seminar. It was a 9-day retreat. And it was October 1998, one Wednesday in October 1998. So like we were at the retreat. It was already the third or fourth day. Ate breakfast, and after breakfast, the volunteers put blindfold on all the participants, and there were about 50 women, about 50 women of us, like all over, coming from all over the US, all over the world. So, and then they got us inside a van, blindfolded. So in my head, I'm like, oh my goodness, anong gagawin sa amin? What are they gonna do? What activities are we gonna do? Where are we going? And it wasn't a long drive, like few minutes drive. Then as soon as we got to our destination, got off the van, took off the blindfold, and the facilitators of the workshop were there and like, yeah, like, welcome, spa day. And I'm like, oh my God, spa day. So like we got massages, mani pedi. And I know now, 2021 na, it's not a big deal, but this was way back in 1998 where self-care wasn't really being, promoted. Back then it was all about being a martyr, like suck it up. So we didn't hear much about self-care. And that's spa day like really made an impact to me, as simple as like getting a massage, mani pedi. I will always remember that day in 1998. And from that day on, I made that conscious choice to prioritize my needs and self-care. Because growing up in the Philippines, like we don't really talk about our needs and our self-care. So, through self-care, it taught me about being self-aware. Like it brought self-awareness, paying attention to my needs and paying attention to the whispers. As Oprah would say, like, listen to the whispers before it becomes a brick wall that will hit your head. Nursing profession, as we know, it's so stressful. And it's so ironic na last year was the year of the nurse. And with the pandemic, as Dr. Jamil was sharing, like, like, oh my goodness, nurses were really tested, especially frontliners. Like I do case management, so I'm not doing patient care, but for the ones that are really in the front line, like really taking of patients, like hats off to all of you, because that was hard, and we're hoping there won't be a second wave. And most of us who got into nursing, like, we get into nursing because we love helping people. We love to make a difference. And I know this is also one of the reasons why I got into coaching, why I love coaching, because it's helping people in a different way. So today will be, the opportunity to share, like I said, the title of my topic is how to go from blah to 3 proven ways to avoid burnout. But before I move forward and start my topic, I want to know, like, if you're the nurse who feels blah or if you're the nurse who feels ah. So we'll take a poll. Like Minette will be posting a poll and vote kayo. So I get a feel where are where are the nurses. And I'll drink water. Still going. Oh, okay. More.
All good?
Okay,
15 seconds.
good. That's it. Oh, I mean, good. Like, oh, yeah. Oh, I'm happy to share the results. At least I'm happy to hear like the Louisians are 60% they feel 40% feels blah. Okay. I'll be sharing, tips, strategies to help you avoid burnout. And as Dr. Jamil mentioned, like, some of the problems, like, problems with, most nurses and maybe Filipino nurses too, we don't know. We're not aware if we're already burnt out. Like we pay little attention to it. We don't know the signs and symptoms of burnout. Like Dr. Jamil was just sharing, like, she didn't know why she was having palpitations, anxiety. And sometimes we relate it as nurses, we relate it agad like it's a illness.
Medical.
And not considering like our situation, maybe it's like, burnout from work. So we just ignore it. Like, we feel tired, exhausted, stress already affecting us physically, mentally, emotionally. Pero like, dead man na lang, or maybe probably just really not aware, like not aware of the problem that they're already experiencing burnout. Like sometimes we don't know how burnout looks like, we don't know how it feels like, we don't know how it sounds like. And some nurses have also settled and accepted like, oh, ito na yon. That's the, life. It's just the way that it is. And I signed up for this, so sige, I'm gonna suck it up. And so they start getting sick, like hypertension, exhausted, fatigue, unhappy, job dissatisfaction, you're irritable, lack of sleep, or reduced quality of sleep. Well, now it doesn't have to be that way anymore. Today, I'll take you on a journey that will lead it back to you. And these are the ways, like, that I've tried, like the last 25 years, 26 years. And so far, it has tremendously helped me. I'm just here to share, like, if it fits, take it. And if it doesn't, ignore it. So I'm gonna share with you now like 3 ways to avoid burnout. But before that, like there's 5 stages of burnout that we probably don't even know. But instead of just showing you the slides and reading the stages of burnout, I'm gonna ask, like, have you heard the story about how to boil a frog? No, no. Maybe some did. But anyway, if you haven't heard the start of the boiling frog experiment, and you're probably asking, like, what does this have to do with the stages of burnout? Well, there's this fascinating 19th century science experiment. And as the story goes, researchers found that, like, when they put a frog in a pan of boiling water, the frog would just quickly jump out. But on the other hand, when they put a frog in a cold water and put the water to boil over time, the frog will just get boiled to death. So like the hypothesis of is that change in temperature is so gradual that the frog does not even realize it's already boiling to death. And while the results of this experiment is in question, it's a good metaphor for burnout. Sometimes we don't even know. Like from Winona University, they studied burnout, and the first stage is like honeymoon phase. Like honeymoon phase, like we're so gung ho. I'm like, yes, new sa job, like I'll take on that project. Like so, we take it on, and then comes the second stage, which is the onset of stress, like you're already feeling like a little bit of anxiety, like palpitations, like we said, and then it goes to chronic stress. Then fourth stage burnout, and then the fifth stage is yung habitual burnout. Like it's so embedded na in our life, like we don't even know the difference of burnout. It feels like I call it like fish in the water. Tayo yung fish, and then the waters burn out, and until we go out from that yung water, like we won't even recognize it's burnout. So that's it. And we'll be sharing the slides, so you'll see like the common symptoms, the different stages of burnout. So now we're gonna go through the three ways. Like I came up with this three ways. First one is to reinvigorate your physical body, your energy, which I call like, body. And it's no coincidence that Dr. Jamil mentioned sleep. Sleep talaga. If I had to name one that would really be helpful in avoiding burnout, it's gonna be sleep. So we take it for granted, but better sleep is really one of the keys to avoid burnout. And I just had this aha moment recently, maybe a couple of months ago. I thought that as soon as I wake up in the morning, that's when my day starts. No pala, it doesn't. It starts the moment I hit my head on my pillow. If I want to know how my day will go the next day, whether at work or if I have something planned, like like my day started the time that I slept. So my invitation and encouragement is for us to self ourselves up to win. I started sa Google Calendar ko, I started blocking my sleep time from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's my sleep time. So by 9:30, I get an alarm from my phone. It's start to wind down na. So start observing your routines too. Like what do you do before you go to sleep? And I created this acronym then too, like from someone shared this acronym. He called it the SPA method to sleep. So S starts for 60 seconds, like once you're in bed na, 60 seconds of stillness. And then P, peaceful healing breath. So start, and usually just those two stages, I start falling asleep na. But if still difficult for you to sleep, like there's appreciation, and just start being grateful, appreciating the things in your life, like ask, asking God, like just thanking God, like for all the blessings you have in your life. So yeah. So that's the first way, like reinvigorating our physical body. Dr. Jamil also mentioned about exercise, but I just wanted to focus on one. So sleep. So we've talked about the body. Now it's time to talk about our mind. So for mind, like the second way is to reclaim your personal power. And here it's setting boundaries. And what's boundaries? Sometimes like, oh, they talk about boundaries. But boundaries is something that helps us define who we are and who we're not. We set boundaries by stopping others' behavior. And the way to extend boundaries is to call forward courage inside us. It's, oh my goodness, it's not easy. It's not easy to say no, especially in our culture. It's so difficult to say no because boundaries, it's like an imaginary line of protection that we draw around us. So we set boundaries to protect ourselves and what's important to us. So for one thing that to remember what boundaries are, it's like, what others cannot do to me or around me. It's about others' actions. And examples of boundaries, like, no one may hit me, no one may raise their voice to me. So those are different kinds of boundaries. And I use a four-step plan. Whenever someone violates my boundary, I use this four-step, and usually I only use up to step 2. But the key here is to come from a very neutral tone of voice, no charge. So like first step is you inform them. You inform them what they're doing. So example, like a doctor's like, raising his voice, galit over the phone. So like you tell like, oh doctor, are you aware that you're, speaking loudly, or do you know that you raised the tone of your voice? And that will cut them off guard. I already used this before. I'm like, oh, and then nag-soften yung voice. So usually step 1 or 2. And then if still it doesn't work, like after informing them and after making them aware, and they still didn't, do yung boundary mo, you make a request. Like, oh doctor, like I request, or I ask that you lower the tone of your voice and talk to me like with respect. And usually after step 2, it will work. But if it doesn't, you take it to step three. You demand. Like, you know what? I really demand, doctor, like you stop that right now. And you may never speak to me using that tone of voice. And like I said, key dito is to speak in a neutral tone, no charge, because you don't want to feed yung discomfort already when someone violates your boundary. And then the fourth one, it's still after informing, after requesting, after demanding, you leave. Like, take yourself away from that situation. Like you say, like, what you're saying, what you're doing is unacceptable to me. So I'm just gonna leave and protect myself. So those are the four-step plan in setting boundaries. And coaching tips, like in setting boundaries, like I said, you can be very, very graceful when setting boundaries. You don't need a machete or become a wall. Nah, you don't need to be mean. And also like setting boundaries it's not to vent out our anger. It's not a way to get even with others, but it's more an expression of self-love and self-respect. And I know I'm a sensitive person, so I just joined this a mastermind group. So there's three of us, and sabi nga like share how they can support me. And I told them like, what, like I'm a really sensitive person, so I asked that you respect that about me, and if you're gonna give me a constructive feedback, here's what's gonna work for me. If you could say three positive things first and then one negative feedback, I know that's gonna work. And I also tell them like, and it's not what you say, but it's the tone of your voice. So yun. So like educating, teaching people in your life, partners, co-workers, how they could, not kind of please you, but like how to better your relationship so it's harmonious. So like those are two I shared, like, the body, which is reinvigorate, reinvigorate our physical body, and then reclaiming our personal power. And then the third way is reigniting our passion. And in reigniting your passion, I shared two things. I shared like, values and our strengths. I'll talk about values first because it's so common. Like when we ask someone, oh, what are your values? And usually automatic answer, like we don't even think about it, like, oh, family, fun, harmony, freedom, automatic. Those are the things that we say. But like, here's how I coach my clients. I ask them like, oh, if you truly want to know your values, there are two things that you could do. Look at your bank statement and your calendar. And if you don't write everything in your calendar, just reflect, like, oh, what did I do the last few days? Because people would say, like, they value family time, pero they don't invest naman to take family vacations. And the last few days, they didn't even spend time with their kids or family or wife, like walang date nights. So those are the two keys, like to look at it. And another way is if you kind of know like what your values are, like, like God, family, love, freedom, those stuff, write it down and then rank it. And the question you could ask with your value is that, okay, if I have to choose value love versus value freedom, and if I could have value love for the rest of my life and not have value freedom for the rest of my life, which would I choose? And your body will have that innate wisdom na like, di maganda yung feeling. So you'll be able to rank it. And then you'll discover like your top two, top three core values. And my invitation is align your goals. Like if you write down your goals, like, okay, is this in alignment with my values? And I noticed like when I started setting goals in alignment with my values, like, I felt happier. Yung stress at work diminished. So yun, like I would encourage everyone to start discovering their values and reorienting and aligning their life with their values. And the last one is discover our strengths. And there's so many assessment tests out there. Like I personally like Gallup's certified strengths assessment, which is called Clifton Strengths. And there you could discover your strengths. And if you don't want to do that, like what you could do, you could ask people in your life closest to you, like like, oh, in three words, whether your spouse, your kids, if you had 3 words to describe me, what would it be? And just pay attention to what they share. Because what I learned now that I'm focusing and learning more about people's strengths, people thrive when they use their strengths, whether at at work and even in their life. Uh, I think one of the cause of burnout too is that we we're given a job that's not in alignment with our strength. And I think in our culture too, whether it's a hospital or maybe even in corporate America, someone gets promoted not because they're good at it, but sometimes it's their length of survey. So I'm like, oh, if we could change that and really have someone align a job because of their strength, I think they're gonna succeed when they'll have more engaged employees and happier employees. And an example that I could share, because like there were 3 people here sa Esdonay that supported me when I was taking my certification to be a Gallup certified strengths. First, like si Minette. Like Minette is so good sa IT. And I think deep in our hearts, like alam natin like what we're good at. Like Minette is good on IT. And I was looking at her strengths. I'm like, oh, of course, like she has analytical strengths. She has learner strengths, like input strengths. And she's able to use that in her work, like she's an IT nurse. So yun naman. And then my sister Kay, like she has communication strength, so that's why she's also thriving as a nursing professor, because her strength is in alignment with her profession. And then Kuya Dino, like I don't know if he uses his competition strength at his work, pero like with our strength, we don't only need to use it at work. We could use it also stuff outside of work. So with Kuya Dino, he has strong competition strength. And one thing that I see how he uses it is he invests the time sa Eslunay. So if you notice, ka-level na natin sa Eslunay ang UP, UST. So his competition strength like really helped him thrive and succeed in life. So those are the 3 ways to avoid burnout, reinvigorate our physical body, reclaim our personal power, and reignite our passion. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. It's how you go from blah to ah.
Thank you so much, Karen, for this great presentation of really knowing like the blah to ah. So thank you so much for that information.